Hi, everybody. Welcome to the channel. Uh, the name I'm going by today is Fat Man, and with me is my son, Little Boy.
Hello.
We had originally thought about using our real names on this channel, um, but I think maybe it would be better to be anonymous, at least for now. Um, we're going to talk about something kind of weird. And it's something we usually keep to ourselves for fairly obvious reasons. And that is that basically our family seems to be cursed. Um, and I know that sounds very out there, and it even the wording, is I think kind of hokey, and it sounds like some Hollywood thing or whatever. But I just don't know how else to put it. Um, so we're just gonna kind of tell some stories from our weird family, and uh yeah. So um Little Boy, what do you think should be the first story we tell?
I would suggest the one with your grandmother and the gypsies.
Okay. So my grandma called them gypsies, and I guess I want to do a disclaimer. Um my grandmother had a good heart, but how do I want to put this? I imagine for a lot of you listening, because like my grandma was born in 1913. If you knew people who were that age, they weren't politically correct or anything. You know what I mean? Um, and so even though she would use the word gypsy, it may have that might not be the right word for describing these individuals, but I'm going to tell the story the way Grandma told it. When she was a little girl, she said that because I live in the middle of nowhere in Ohio. I actually live currently um, just up the road from the Mansfield Reformatory. Um, and if you've heard of that, it is, some people say it's the most haunted prison in America. Um, so it gives you a rough idea of the area where we live and where our stories take place. Um, at any rate, my grandma was born out in the country when she was a little girl. She said there were these gypsies that kept going around to people's houses while the parents were at work. So my grandmother's parents, who had died long before I was born, I never met them or anything. They were farmers. Um, and at any rate, grandma said that um, the gypsies would show up, and they had this thing that I always imagined the kind of old timey wooden circus wagon that we see in the Wizard of Oz with Professor Marvel, that where he's doing his fortune teller thing with Dorothy. I imagine something very similar to that, the way she described this wagon. Um, and they did the candy van thing where they were trying to coax children out of their houses, and the parents didn't like it. The parents seemed to know better, and then that's why these guys came when the parents weren't around. So there's a predatory element, to the story. um but at any rate, in the center of the wagon was this wooden table that was actually a huge Ouija board. And um my grandma, she had warned me against using Ouija boards at one point. I did use them. I did have things go wrong. We'll come back to that. Um, but I asked her what happened, and she wouldn't tell me. She just said it was bad. It was something bad happened. So various members of my family, we look back and we think that probably happened around the year 1920. And that would be seemingly where it all begins. Where the various members of our family, we are just weirdness magnets. And it's sort of like the kind of stuff you see on a TV show like X-Files or something. That stuff just keeps happening to us over and over again. But I think that, and this is just my opinion, this is just speculation, I will do my best to try to present things as facts. And then I'll let you know when something's an opinion or I'm drawing some kind of a conclusion. My opinion is that when my grandma and her sister were in that wagon, they basically opened a door to the, whatever you want to call it, the paranormal or whatever. And that door has just never been closed. And so it affected all 7 of my grandma's children. It affected all of their children, which includes me. It affected all of their children, which includes my son. And my son could tell you, growing up, we had a lot of hauntings, didn't we?
We sure did.
Like shadow people and mirrors at one of our old houses. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I should try to do story. It'd be hard for me to do stories in chronological order. They kind of things just occurred to me at random. Like when I was talking about my grandma's Ouija board thing, I want to start talking about my Ouija board thing. My Ouija board thing was in the the mid 90s. Around 1994, I guess. There were some girls in college that wanted to play with a Ouija board. At the time, I was an atheist. I did not, well, and that's a specifically religious term. I didn't believe in anything, like I didn't believe in the supernatural at all. And I did have memories from when I was a kid of weird stuff happening, but I just sort of decided over the years, oh, that stuff must not have really happened. I must have had an overactive imagination or something, I was much more of a Scully than a Mulder. At any rate, so we start messing with this Ouija board, and the girls were like, am I ever going to get married? Is he going to be handsome? Is he going to be rich? It was all stuff like that. And it would come around to me, and I was asking questions like, is there a God? Does reincarnation exist? Like I was asking that kind of thing. And the whatever you contact when you use a Ouija board, I was annoying it. It didn't like my questions. They would ask the question like, is my husband going to be handsome? And it'd be like, yes. And the thing would slide over to yes. And it would come around to me, and I'd ask it a question like about, let's say, reincarnation. It would say like no or whatever. Like, okay. And at any rate, I was trying to apply the scientific method. And so one of the things I was doing was I was at this point in the night not touching, I don't even know what you call the little triangular piece that moves around, but I wasn't touching the board at all. I chose to ask what my dad's name was, because when my dad found out that my mom was pregnant with me, he just took off. and it was something that my family didn't like talking about, and so nobody in this room knew my dad's name except for me, and I'm not touching the board. And again, I'm trying to be anonymous here, but my dad has a long name, you know. um it correctly spelled out his first, middle, and last name, so it's about 30 letters, I guess. um but the board correctly spelled all that. And so that was the first moment for me where I was like, oh man, like this is real. Um this isn't the girls in the room who don't know the answer and they're just pushing it around to mess with me or something. This is something really going on here. Um as the night progresses, whatever this thing is that we're talking to, it starts to claim that it's my dead uncle. And I wasn't thinking of my dad's side of the family, um, which, by the way, because of Facebook, I know who my dad is now, and we interact now on a regular basis. But I hadn't met him yet when this story takes place. And at any rate, um, I'm being long-winded. The point is, all my uncles were alive on both my mom and my dad's side of the family. But this thing claimed it was my dead uncle. And at the time I said, well, that doesn't make sense. All my uncles are alive. And it was like annoyed with me. And I was like, what do you want? And it claimed that it was the ghost of a human being whose daughter was raped by a guy who was in prison. And so this thing wanted me to break into the prison and murder the guy who did it. And so I said, I'm not doing that. I'm not breaking into a prison and killing somebody, no way I'm doing that. And so it got really mad, and the thing would go MD, 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 kind of like medical doctor. To this day, I don't know what MD stands for. I've had some friends tell me they think it's murder death, but I mean, you can't back that up though, But at any rate, MD, MD over and over. And so the girl who was kind of hosting this event, she was Wiccan. And she said, I know this cleansing spell where I'm gonna sort of hit the reset button on this board, basically. So she did her thing, but it didn't work. It was still going MD, MD, MD. And there were other girls with, there were basically different people were from different walks of life, and nothing worked. And I'm not Catholic, but there was one girl who was Catholic, and she prayed that it would stop, and that's when it stopped. And at the time, and again, I was an atheist. I was like, that's interesting that it stopped, and again, I was looking at everything with like the scientific method. But yeah, that was the Ouija board story with us. I'm trying to think of other stories that are noteworthy. In the 1960s, at some point when my mom was a little girl, her oldest brother, my uncle, he was coming home from work one night, and he would have been, I think, about probably in his 20s and still living at home. And at any rate, he saw what, in the strictest sense, I will call a UFO, in the sense that it was flying, it was an object, he could not identify it. I am not claiming it was a spaceship or that there were aliens in it or any of that. I'm just saying it was a UFO. It was over the farmhouse where everybody lived, and it was generating this light that he said was so bright that it looked like it was noon. That everything should have been pitch black as late at night as he was getting home, probably coming home from, a bar or something like that. Um, and at any rate, though, he said he could make out the details on the barn and the chicken coop and the garage and everything perfectly. So I thought that was very interesting. And then another interesting thing that happened was everybody got real sick after that. Not him, because he had when you're driving home from the nearest town, there's a lot of trees blocking your view, but you come around a corner and then that's when you can see the farmhouse. And so when he saw this UFO, he just stopped the truck and stared at it. And at any rate, in the days that followed, everybody got sick. And I'd never heard this story until my grandmother died, because she didn't really like people talking about that kind of thing. So they just sort of stayed quiet for her benefit. And then after she passed away, the different members of the family were kind of comparing notes, and here all of us were having these crazy experiences, So everybody remembered getting sick. My mom was the youngest girl in the family. She had a little brother who I won't say his name again, trying to be anonymous. I spoke to him about it, and he was so young he didn't really remember it. And he said something about I thought it was about having lice. He's like, I thought we had a lice outbreak and everybody got sick because of that. And I thought they shaved our heads. And but then what the older members of the family were saying, like the uncle who was in the truck who stopped, he said, no, that wasn't it. Everybody's hair started falling out. Basically, he goes on to describe what sounds like radiation poisoning. And my mom started having really bad seizures, and I'd never heard that either. And then when I was in my, I guess, mid-20s, for maybe like a 5-year period, I ended up having really bad seizures, and then they just went away after a while. So I thought that was interesting. One time in the early 90s, me and my mom had gone Christmas shopping, and we came home, and we were on the way home, we were at a crossroads, and there was this ball of orange light over the road, and it went over our car, and it made the car shut off. And from like the distance from the front to the back of our car seems like that was about the same as the distance from the front to the back of this ball, this sphere. And it didn't put out a lot of light. The light was orange. And it followed the sort of the shape of the road. If the road went a little bit to the left, this UFO would go a little bit to the left. If the road went up and down a little, it went up and down a little. It's as if it was riding a pole that was like attached to the yellow line of the road. You know what I mean? And it was gone. And then about a minute went by, and my mom and we were just staring. And we were just like in shock. And about a minute later, my mom goes, "Did you see that?" And I said, "Yeah." And probably another minute went by, and then she started the car. And that was the first time I realized the car had been shut off somehow, or it stalled out or whatever, And I was like, that was super weird, So I don't know. Like, there's so many stories, I don't even know how to tell them all. What about you, little boy? Can you think of something else that we should be telling?
Well, we got a bunch of small stories, and we could have some larger stories like the bridge.
Oh, the bridge one was crazy. Yeah, the bridge is one time I was driving to work and the brakes went out on my van. Um, and there's this one lane bridge, only big enough for one vehicle to go through at a time. And the way that works, because I've talked to some people in bigger towns and they kind of don't know what like the etiquette is here in the country or whatever. Whichever car is the closest to the bridge has the right away. So there was this car and it was closer to the bridge than I was, so I should have stopped to let the car through. But like I say, my brakes are out, so I'm going to get in a head-on collision. And the ditches on the sides of the road, on my side of the bridge are very treacherous, but the ditches on the other side of the bridge are much more shallow. And that'll come into play in a minute. But so the point is, I can't like just pull off the road, or you know what I mean? Um, Depending on what I'm going to do, I'm going to end up in the water. Um, and really wreck my vehicle. And I just, I didn't know what to do. And I remember going, oh God, like out loud, because I thought, I was going to just drive headlong into this other car. And we passed each other. And I felt like time had slowed down. And I remember looking from side to side, and I was so close to this other car. Their mirror, because they were a car and I was in a van, their mirror was lower than my mirror. Our mirrors would have hit each other if the mirrors were at the same height. My mirror passed over their mirror. That's how close I was. I remember looking over to the other side at my other mirror, and it was barely missing, because the bridge was made out of these like iron girders or whatever that were painted like this really light shade of like a bluish green color. And I was just barely missing the girders with the other mirror. And so the two vehicles pass each other. And now that I'm on the other side, I intentionally drive into that shallow ditch, and then that stops my vehicle. The guy in the other car, he just stops his car in the middle of the road, and we both get out of each other's cars, and I think he's coming to yell at me. And I threw my hands up kind of like in this apologetic gesture, and I said, I'm so sorry, my brakes went out, my brake line snapped, I'm so sorry. And I said, are you okay? And he just stood there for a minute, not doing anything. And I walked up to the bridge and I kind of moved my hands from them being up, almost in like that, like a don't shoot me kind of a position. You know what I mean? I stretched my arms wide and I could almost touch each side of the bridge just with my arms. And I'm 6'4". So like I can basically reach about 6'4" wide too, right? But I couldn't quite grab each side of the bridge. But if I just barely swayed from left to right a little, I could touch one side then the other. That's how close it was. It was like a 7-foot wide bridge or whatever. And there's no way each car was 3.5 feet wide. Does that make sense? It the cars absolutely could not fit. Just me by myself, going up to my van, I couldn't I couldn't like bear hug the hood of the van or something, because it was too big. I'm not wording that quite right. I think you get what I mean. It was just this impossible moment. Um, uh, little boy, you should tell him about the ghost of little boy that we used to see at our old house.
Well, it's a weird one. I think I can only think of like 2 sightings, and then the story you had about the running around the halls. I'll leave that one to you.
Well, I'll just do that real
One.
quick. I'll just do that
Mhm.
one real quick. Um, so my son and daughter were downstairs playing video games, and I'm upstairs in the bathroom brushing my teeth when I see my son run down the hallway. And so I stopped brushing my teeth for a second, and I wasn't even quite looking. And I said, "Hey, no running in the house." And I hear both kids from downstairs still playing video games call up and let me know where they were at and what they were doing. So I'm like, "Well, who was that kid?" And it seemed to be the same age and everything as little boy was at the time. Um, and then you saw him out in the van one day when you were cleaning, right?
Yep.
You want to
I
tell
was
that story?
Yeah, I was cleaning the back of the van at the time, and I had just finished, whatever, putting pop cans in a trash bag. And as I turned to my left towards the open door, it just looked like a solid, just dark little kid was getting in at me. And then I just weren't there.
So he just
There.
vanished before your eyes. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like an inch from my face.
Oh, I didn't know it was like that.
It was
So
like
he was
some,
like aggressive.
yeah, it was some not cool levels of in my face.
I'm sorry to laugh. It just your wording
Yeah.
is funny.
And then the other time was I was going from wherever the bathroom upstairs towards my room, which would have been at the end of the hall to the left. And I passed my sister's room where like basically the same black looking thing was behind the door. And when I like turned around, since I saw it out of the corner of my eye, it was just an empty area behind the door. Those
Yeah.
are kind of the big sightings of it.
Your sister's right here, not online, but she's in the same room with me. She's cooking. Do you have any stories you want to add? Come here. I'll turn the computer around so it will record her voice.
One time in one of our old houses, there was a shadow person in my mom's mirror. I was terrified of her room, and every time I wanted to go to my brother's room, I would have to run past hers. So I'd always avoid looking at her room. One time, I decided to look in, and there was just this black, shadowy figure standing in her mirror where it would be by the door. But there was nobody by the door at all. And it looked at me, but there was nothing there.
Yeah, that is creepy. Um, it was interesting in that house. Like, when I was a teenager, I lived in my grandma's basement for a while. It was a really nice, like a finished basement, like a rec room kind of thing. But at any rate, basements don't bother me in the slightest. I love them. You know, my man cave now is our basement in our current house. But I thought it was really interesting. Everybody in our family had nightmares about the basement in the house that my daughter was just talking about. And interestingly enough, the nightmares were all kind of the same, which is that basement had a wall that ran the length of the basement. And so the one half uh, was kind of like a tiki bar, and the other half of the basement was like our laundry room. And On the laundry side, the nightmare everybody kept having was something, and some kind of monsters or whatever would sort of like abduct us and try to pull us through the wall of the basement, which went out under our driveway, which, by the way, is the driveway where the van was parked when little boy kind of saw the thing that got in his face. You know, that would have been that part of the house. But I thought it was such a weird thing to dream about to begin with, getting pulled under a driveway, you know. But then everybody unanimously had nightmares about the same thing, and we weren't telling each other about it necessarily. So it really did seem to be independent of one another. And then my daughter's closet upstairs, she always thought there was stuff in the closet. And hold on, my daughter's telling me something. What? Oh yeah, she's saying she'd fill it with stuffed animals and stuff because she was worried of things being in there. And I remember her telling some really weird stories. Like one time it was summer vacation and I heard her in there talking. And I went in there and I'm like, who are you talking to? And she's like, kids from school. And I'm like, do you have your mom's phone or something? Or like, what do you mean you're talking to kids from school? And she's like, no, they were here with me. It was just children from my class. And I'm like, well, that can't happen. Yeah, I don't even know. We're probably gonna have to break all these down. We should probably give each one of these stories like its own video or something. Am I leaving anything out, little boy? Is there something
I
want,
don't
like a
know
big
if you
one?
mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned the Indian Hill or not.
Oh, that's a huge one. Yeah.
But I think that'd be
So
a good
again,
follow-up
the
about that.
farmhouse, and I don't know if this is before or after the UFO over the farmhouse. Right across the street from there was this Indian burial ground. I'm trying to think what they call those Indians now. It's Hopewell Indians. If you look into the Hopewell Indian thing, it's interesting because there's actually, if I remember correctly, there's not a lot of evidence that there was a Hopewell Indian tribe. They found this particular kind of bones on the land of a farmer named Hopewell. And these quote unquote Indians were described as giants. They were supposed to be physically very large. There's a lot of stories of them having red hair. There's a lot of stories of them being involved in cannibalism, where they were trying to actually eat the real Native Americans that lived in the surrounding areas, like Mohicans and stuff like that. At any rate, there was this Hopewell burial mound right across from the farmhouse I'm describing. And, well, I should say the farm. I mean, I guess it's not lined up with the farmhouse itself, but the farm is multiple buildings that went along the road there. The road itself wasn't always where it is now. They moved it sometime before I was born. I was born in the 70s. So I don't know if it was 10 or 20 or how many years earlier they destroyed the old road and then they paved the new road, but the road went right through this burial mound. The family, well, the construction workers literally tried to bulldoze this burial mound, which that's, less than awesome. They when they encountered these gigantic bones, and I don't know how big they were. I don't know if they mean giants as in like say Andre the Giant, where like how tall was he? Like 8 feet tall or something. I don't know if they mean it like that, or if they mean a giant like 15 feet tall, like because there's a lot of stories online about people are finding these burial mounds like all the time now. And some of them have some really, really big bones in them. So yeah, I don't know how big these bones were. Again, I wasn't born yet. I'm hearing the stories kind of secondhand. But I guess the Smithsonian took the bones and basically told the family, yeah, you got, this is this big historical discovery. I should have said historic, not historical. Sorry. It's a very historic discovery. You're welcome to come out to Washington and view them in the museum, blah, blah, blah. Well, the punchline there is no, they're never put on display. Nobody was ever able to go see them after all. So yeah, I thought that was, yeah, that's pretty noteworthy in terms of weird stuff surrounding the family. Another one, by the way, I shouldn't leave out my wife's side of the family. When my wife and I were dating, I was talking to her dad, and her dad was in Vietnam, and my dad was also in Vietnam. They actually knew each other. But her dad had some weird experiences in Vietnam, but he was talking about some ancestor of his who, I don't know what war that would have been now, if it was World War I or World War II, but he was somewhere in Europe. I want to say it was World War II, but he was somewhere in Europe, and they were fighting some group of people, and he claimed he saw a werewolf. And I thought, that's just crazy. Like at the time I was like, man, that's just that, no way. But I don't know. Like we've seen so many weird things since then. There was one time when my wife and I were driving somewhere, and we saw a car in front of us on the road just vanish. It turned like it was going to go down the on-ramp onto the highway that we were going to follow it and drive on. And as soon as it turned onto the on-ramp, it just faded. Kind of like in Back to the Future when Marty McFly just is fading out of existence. That's like what happened to this car. And we both saw it. We were both like, holy crap, what was that? So anymore, there's nothing that I say is ridiculous. I've had too many of these weird encounters all through my life that I'm like, okay. There was this one time we were going to a picnic, me and my mom and my grandma. I don't know if I told this one already. And we saw Bigfoot off on the side of the road in the woods there. Seemed to be a Bigfoot walking along. I hit the brakes. We were, it was like a potluck thing we were going to, and we were bringing baked beans. And I had baked beans all over the back of my car. And we got out of the car, we were looking, we just couldn't see it anymore. And I don't know if, it could have been, I guess, a guy in a suit or something messing with us, and then he just hid. I don't know. But that always stuck with me too, is kind of a big deal. And interestingly enough, I got interviewed for a Bigfoot TV show at one point, and told him about that, about that encounter. And something the guy who hosted the show said is, oftentimes, because I'd always thought of Bigfoot more like just like a gorilla or something, but for colder climates, this far north. And the guy that hosts the show said there was a staggering number of reports that suggested Bigfoot was more like a spirit, that it could just appear and disappear, kind of like the black thing that was rushing towards my son. So that makes me think maybe not all this stuff is as separate as we think it is. Just in my humble opinion, I think a lot of these things are spirits, and they just like to screw with people. They want people to think, like, personally, I'm not actually sold on the idea of aliens from outer space. I think it's entirely possible this is some kind of a spirit that wants you to think it's an alien they're just messing with you, I think. But I don't know. We don't have any solid evidence for like anything. So on this channel, I'm going to, sometimes I'll just kind of tell stories like this one where I can't back any of it up. Something I tell my friends is, if you hang around me long enough, you're probably going to see something sooner or later. And that's been the case. I'd say 3 or 4 of my friends thought it sounded crazy, and now they've had the experiences with me. Especially when I was younger, and guys would come over and we'd drink some beers by the campfire or something like that, and they'd crash on my couch. They'd have stuff messing with them in the night. I had a friend whose initials were CC, and I remember him crashing on my couch one night, and he said a girl appeared before him and was trying to mess around with him. And he got real scared. I was at a friend's house one time, and that friend lived in Maryland. And I heard the dog barking in the night, woke me up, and I saw he had this like hole in the wall, and this like fog came out of the hole in the wall, and it materialized. He had a pool table, and these, I'll call them ghosts, but again, I'm not so sure that they're actual human souls. I think it might just be spirits of some sort. Because spirit is a very, very generic word. At any rate, they materialized, and they looked like Revolutionary War soldiers, and they were standing around this pool table with like tankards of ale. And I was terrified. I was just absolutely terrified. And they looked solid, but they kind of looked like something out of a black and white photo. Like they had no color to them at all. And I can't remember what noise I was making. I don't know if I tried to talk to them, or I was so scared I couldn't tell you what came out of my mouth. But as soon as I made sound, though, they looked at me and just turned back into fog. And the room was foggy, and the fog like sucked over into that hole, and the dog had been barking at him, and then the dog was barking at the hole. And my friend, he asked what was going on, why is the dog barking, all that. And I was like, screw this, man, I'm out of here. So I left. But then I think me hanging around him caused him to have experiences after that. So, however you want to word it, if like my family is cursed or whatever, unfortunately, we seem to have the ability to rub off on others. But yeah, we're gonna devote a whole YouTube channel to this stuff. And one of the reasons I was doing it this morning is there's actually been a rash of Bigfoot sightings in the area we live in. And I kind of wanted to start covering that. I wanted to just, you know, if there's an article in the newspaper about it, I'll just read the article for you. We'll do some videos about older sightings. So if it's like Barney and Betty Hill or whatever getting abducted by UFOs in the 50s, you know, I'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Mandela effect and just everything, you know. Yeah, so if you're interested in that sort of thing, maybe hit about or think about hitting the subscribe button. You know, like the video, leave a comment on the video. That really helps us out in terms of how the YouTube algorithm works. And that's about it. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.